Hello, good morning.
Morning.
Woo! Who's here? Miguel, Hallie, Mackenzie. Is that Keeney?
Kitty.
Grace, Lamaya. Oh, that SOS Biology's made a comment. Those beautiful people. Madison,
Isaiah. Way to go.
Alani, Nelvik, Rosalind, Lauren Pritt, Reef,
Jonas,
Twisted Foxy,
which I believe is Elijah.
Daniel. So I got some people.
Woo.
I think we're getting right into it today. So if you're here today, hopefully you've completed part 3 and 4, or at least tried to complete bioenergetics and homeostasis. We're going to go over those questions. Hopefully you have a piece of paper and a pen maybe to add to your graphic organizer kind of things that we're trying to give you. Mrs. Smith, one of my students asked me if we're ever going to get more detailed on that. And I told her at some point I'm going to make available the 2 years ago when we did like the late evening pre-test where we made these graphic organizers. I'll share those with them if they want to watch those.
I love when former students pop back in because they have subscribed. Hi, Alexia. I miss you. Goodbye.
Yeah, I like that too. Emma just popped in. Libby's here. Andrew Non. Ricardo's popping in. All right, so that will happen. Reminder. So between now and Tuesday, the quizzes that go with this section will be open.
I know we've had so many people do it last week.
Yeah.
What?
They're on that Keystone review sheet. They're at the bottom. I highlighted which 2 quizzes it is, and I'm even going to post a link to it in the chat.
Please.
All right. So, are we about ready to get into this, Mrs. Smith?
Bioenergetics.
Bioenergetics.
AKA the energy of life. And when we say energy, you say?
In the chat.
Hopefully.
I will say that this is the section, this section in homeostasis, these are the 2 sections people do the worst on. These are the 2 hardest sections on the test. So if you walk away today feeling pretty good about this, you're in good shape. I see ATP, Ashlyn. Look at Ashlyn. Oh, I see a bunch of them. Ashlyn, Miguel, Emma, Grace. They all popped in at once. Andrew. All right. Here we go. Let me change my camera. Mrs. Smith, if I step to right and you can't hear me, you'll have to let me know.
I'll let you
know. I can't figure out how to change my camera. Here we go. Did it change?
Nope, it's frozen on your face smiling. Welcome to the Crazy Smith and Suter Show. We swear we know technology, but
it never works.
Oh, wow. Yep, nope, it's still your face frozen. It's quite entertaining as the times. There we go, light energy. All right, make it big.
All right, here we go.
Yay, you got it.
If I was going to write a really quick cheat sheet to make sure that I knew what was going on with bioenergetics, so I made sure, like if I wanted to walk into the test, pull out my scrap piece of paper, and what's going to help me get through bioenergetics, these are the things that I would write down. I would start with like,
hi, it's just me. Because Mr. Suter just turned off his camera, apparently. So if you were going to go into the Keystone for that day, what we're trying to do is overall talk to you about what you could do really, really quick to go over bioenergetics. So hold on one second while I tell Mr. Suter that he's not on there. And if he doesn't come back, then I will just do it right here on my board for you. Hey, Suter, you turned off your camera. All right, so let's talk about bioenergetics really, really quickly. So the big thing overall that you need to know is that we are doing an overview of bioenergetics, or the energy of life. So everything starts from the sun, from light energy that Mr. Suter is now bringing back on the camera again. And hopefully that means that he is back and ready to go.
I don't know. I don't know what happened. It's just like a crash. All right, let's see if it works. If it doesn't work, you can do it. Light energy goes to what? Stored. Can you see it writing? Yes, stored. Oh, I get chalkboards. Chemical energy, right? So we go from light energy to stored chemical energy, and then finally, I'm running out of room. Usable. Do you know how long it's been since I wrote out a chalkboard? All right. Light energy, stored chemical energy, usable chemical energy. Those are the things that I would take in, knowing that. And then I would also probably put, between light energy and stored chemical energy, what's that process? And I'd make myself a note.
So I'm hearing Mr. Suter, but they are saying I can't see or hear anything. I just want to make sure that it's not just...
Is that a delayed reaction? Does it look
right.
like it's working?
Can they hear me and not you? I can hear both of them through StreamYard. So please, if you're not hearing us, let us know.
And then we'll just do the next one real quick. Hopefully. Respiration, right? So let me get off this camera. Maybe that's what's jacking it all up.
They said some of them are saying they can. There's just a couple of them that say they can't. So we're okay.
It really does not like me changing this camera around. It's crazy. I'm like a blank screen again, but that's okay. They can still hear me. We'll see if the camera comes back. So that's what I would take in, guys.
We focus so much on bioenergetics, and we spend all this time going through the Calvin cycle, talking about the light dependent, the light independent reactions. In the chloroplast, we talked about the thylakoids and the stroma and all of that. And that's great if you want to go back in and really focus in on each part. But what we tried to do by doing this overall picture is, can you do a really quick overview, 5 seconds on your paper for the Keystones? What can you do? So you walk in and you remember photosynthesis is going from light energy to stored energy, or glucose, and then cellular respiration is glucose going to that ATP energy. So really, really quickly going through that quick nitty gritty of what is the stored energy, what is the usable energy, and the processes to get there. Because a lot of the sample Keystone questions that we're hopefully going to go over in a second here are talking about that general understanding. And the big word that you're going to see on the sample questions is energy transformation. So transformation is going from the one type to the other. So hopefully Mr. Suter is going to pop in here real quickly, because I don't know if it's going to allow me to share my screen or not without him here. I am going to attempt to do that, and we'll see if it'll work, and hopefully then he'll pop back in. But we're going to look at a couple of different questions for dealing with bioenergetics first. So I'm going to try. Like I said, I'm not the owner of this, so hopefully it's going to let it go while Mr. Suter is popping back in here. So I think this is the screen that I want to show you, but it's not letting me put it up there. Great. This is wonderful. I love when everything works. So Suter, you're not on, as I yell at him across the doorway there. So the first question, if you were looking at it, and you do all have access to this, and again, Mr. Suter shared that document to you, so I'm sorry that I'm kind of talking and you can't see it right now. But when you're looking at that first question, it says that a student observes a small green organelle in a plant cell. So if we're talking about a small green organelle in a plant cell, green, plant, chloroplast. Immediately, that's what you should be thinking. As soon as you see green, you think chloroplast. Hopefully, then that makes you think of photosynthesis. So I haven't even finished the question yet, and I'm already thinking, all right, I need to talk about photosynthesis. So when I talk about photosynthesis, we go back to that energy transformation, and it says which transformation most likely occurs. A, is it ATP to light? B, light to chemical? C, heat to electrical? Or D, chemical to chemical? Well, photosynthesis starts with light. So the only answer that is a good one there is light to chemical. For the second question that is on there, Mr. Shooter's walking over here to join us. It says photosynthesis and cellular respiration are two major processes of carbon cycling in living organisms. And so you might look at that and start to panic and to think of carbon cycling. I can't share my screen, so I'm just talking to them right now because I don't have that right. Sorry, he came in here to see what's going on as his computer restarts. So you might see carbon cycling and think, oh my gosh, I don't know anything about carbon cycling. All living things have carbon. We've said it over and over again. And that beginning part really doesn't matter because the second part of the question says which statement correctly describes one similarity between photosynthesis and cellular respiration. So Mr. Suter and I haven't before done a Venn diagram for photosynthesis and for cellular respiration. So if we're dealing with photosynthesis and cellular respiration, you could easily do a quick Venn diagram. And kind of start to list things for yourself that would work in there. Thank you for those of you that answered Emma's question. Yes, it was B, the one that started with light. So in your Keystone exam, when you hit a question, instead of just trying to read through the answers, think about what you could need. So it says, what is something that is a similarity? So both occur in animal and plant cells. Well, if I were doing this diagram, photosynthesis only occurs in plants. Respiration occurs in animals and plants. So it can't be that one as my answer because they both don't occur in animal and plant cells. For B, it says both include reactions that transform energy. And I know I don't have the camera close up, but that's what I wrote in the center, that they're both transformations. So, okay, great. I'm going to go to the next one and kind of think about it. C, both convert light energy into chemical. Nope. Photosynthesis is light to chemical. Cellular respiration is chemical to chemical, stored to usable. So it's not C. And then D says both synthesize organic molecules as end products. And really, you know what I mean? When we talk about organic molecules as end products, we're not really going to be looking at that organic molecule as the end product. So both include reactions that transform energy. And again, I'm sorry that it's kind of going like this. Hopefully Mr. Suter will be back very, very shortly. For question number 14, it's talking about a protein and it changing its shape. So as soon as I see changing its shape, it says in there concentration gradients, and it says, all this stuff that I start to get, messed up with. The question itself says, which molecule was most likely used by the protein as an energy source? When we say energy, you say ATP. All of the stuff before that question doesn't really matter. So make sure you're reading what the question is actually asking. So it says, what's the energy source? The energy source is going to be ATP. That's the only usable energy in the body. After that, there is an open-ended question. I'm going to come back to that, and I'm going to jump down to, never mind. We're going to talk about that open-ended question because here's Mr. Suter to share that with us and talk about the open-ended question. Welcome back, Mr. Suter.
My Microsoft Windows. The computer just totally voted against all my cameras and microphones. There's 3 cameras hooked up, and I couldn't get one to work and whatever. Hey, everybody. I thought I'd join you. What are we doing? Bioenergetics?
Yeah, so question 12 was letter B. Question 13 is letter B, and question 14 is letter A, for those of you that were looking at that and trying to follow along with me as I panicked and did that all on my own. Thanks, Mr. Suter.
Love it. You did such a good job.
I was supposed to talk about homeostasis today. That was
So wait, what are we doing here? So we're talking about this question, this open-ended question. You know what? I'm going to share my screen because I can control it.
Please do.
You know, like hopefully it won't blow up my whole computer system again. Our students are pretty patient today. I love it. So here we go. We have an open-ended question on bioenergetics, I'm assuming. So first thing, they say, hey, use this diagram. And they give you a diagram that says energy in, photosynthesis, energy out. And then the next one says energy in, cellular respiration, energy out. If it were me, am I right? You're laughing at it.
I'm laughing at Andrew.
Yes. Good, Andrew. So if it were me, I would be like, you know, I might even write above energy in there on the first one. I might write sunlight and then stored chemical energy. I might write stored chemical energy, usable chemical energy, just to remind myself that's all they're really talking about here. So in the first question, complete the chart by describing energy transformations involved in each process. And then they give you photosynthesis and cellular respiration. To me, the easiest thing to do would be to maybe at the top of each one would be to write the chemical equation of photosynthesis and respiration. And you might say to yourself, I don't remember those. How can you not remember those? Like if I say to you, hey, write the equation for photosynthesis, you need to think to yourself, well, what does a plant need? Well, a plant needs sunlight, and it needs water, and it needs carbon dioxide. So there you have the beginning, right? Carbon dioxide, CO2 plus H2O. A little bit of sunlight. What's it get? Sugar and O2. All right, so I might write those under that to help me. But I think really all you need to be able to do in these boxes is explain that photosynthesis takes light energy and transforms that energy into stored chemical energy in the form of a carbohydrate, in the form of a sugar. And then under respiration, as long as you write something about, you know, taking that carbohydrate, that glucose molecule, that stored chemical energy, and transforming it through the process of in the mitochondria, right, through cellular respiration, into usable chemical energy in the form of ATP, then you've hit it. You got it. That's what they want. You know, don't make it harder than it is. And even if it, you know, like, you know, even if there's something a little bit more that maybe the grader or whoever's reading your essay wanted, that's the crux of it. And as long as you get that and put it into your own words, I think you'll be great. The next one, describe how energy transformations involved in photosynthesis are related to energy transformations involved in cellular respiration. They're just I mean, this is, what's that old saying, like beating a dead horse? I mean, it's the same, that's what they're doing. They're just beating the same topic over and over, right? So in photosynthesis, we take light energy and we change it to stored chemical energy. That stored chemical energy can be moved around the cell, so it can be used in other places. Stored chemical energy, or it can be stored, is what I really should say, right? Stored chemical energy can then be taken to the mitochondria, where it can be broken down into usable chemical energy through cellular respiration. Right? It's kind of, I hate when students say it's the opposite. Like, I don't like that per se, that one is the opposite of the other, because it's not like we go one way and then turn around and go back the other way. It's a one-way process. We start with sunlight, we store it, and then we make it usable, and then it's used, and the process is over, right? That's why we need the sun to hit the earth every day. That's why we need photosynthesis to happen every day. Does that make sense? I hope so. All right. Does that work for you, Mrs. Smith? Mrs. Smith turned her mic off like she's done. She feels that She's over there breathing into a brown paper bag.
No, I'm fine. All right, so we're going to talk about homeostasis a little bit. And the first thing I wanted to kind of do to talk about that is, you know, you're going to see throughout this that it constantly uses the vocabulary words of concentration gradient. And I was trying to think of a way to go over concentration gradient, because I feel like no matter how I described it in my class this year, there was still some confusion about it. So, you know, Mr. Shooter and I used that whole downstream thing. But so I started to think about what you would do with like woodworking. And you talk about like going against the grain when you're sanding wood, and it talks about how the movement of that grain on the wood. And I know some of you do some of those things, like they work in wood shop and metal shop. So I was kind of thinking, so I grabbed this real quick, which is just a binder sitting around. And then if you look at that, okay, it has a gradient. It's not perfectly flat. The bottom I'm trying to keep level, but if you look at the top, there's a little bit of a gradient. So when I put a ball on the top of this, I'm trying to like hold it up for the camera, and I let it go, it's going to go down the gradient. Ooh, I hit my computer. So it's going to go, stop it. All of a sudden we're acting like the nons. Just so that we can't stop laughing on screen. So, you know, it's going to go down the concentration gradient. It's going to go from where it's a higher level to a lower level. So kind of keep that in mind when you're talking about concentration gradients with molecules. It's the same idea that where there's more of them, it's going to want to move from a higher concentration to a lower concentration. And it doesn't use any energy to move in that way. If I'm going with the grain, with the gradient, it doesn't cause any energy. But if I don't want the ball to roll down this way, if I want it to go the other way, I have to increase something else. I have to use energy maybe to lift this up so that it will go in the other direction. So energy causes you the ability to move things against the gradient. So just a quick overview with homeostasis as we go into this part. And I guess I will share my screen again, is what Mr. Suter is saying, because he unshared his screen. So now I have to find it again. Sorry. That's okay. Not a problem. Okay, so when we're looking at the questions about...
do you want me to control it, or do you want to control it?
No, I can control it. It's fine.
Okay, there you go.
So
I know you like to be in control.
When we are dealing with this next question, it says carbon dioxide and oxygen are molecules that can move freely across a plasma membrane. What determines the direction that carbon dioxide and oxygen molecules move? So again, looking at that binder, which direction was it going to move? It's going to move from where it's a higher concentration to where it's going to go to a lower concentration. It's going to go from high to low. So then as I look at the answers, which one of those support that idea that we're looking at something from a high to a low concentration? So the first one says the orientation of cholesterol in the plasma membrane. Well, that's not really going to do anything. That's like saying, where's your membrane and what's it made of? Okay, that's not really going to affect necessarily the movement. The next one says the concentration gradient across the plasma membrane. Okay, so concentration gradient deals with high to low. That makes sense. The next one, the configuration of phospholipids. That's just, again, the makeup. And then D says location of receptors on the surface. Again, that's just the makeup. So for question 16, the best one is dealing with that concentration gradient and is letter B. If we move on to question 17, it's talking about a sodium-potassium pump. As soon as I see the word pump, I think it needs energy. Okay, those old-fashioned pumps outside, you know, that you had to pump to get water. It required energy in order to get water to come out of it. And it even tells you it requires energy. So I know it requires energy. To me, that means it's active transport and it's moving against the gradient. Movement of glucose does not require energy. Okay, so glucose is then moving with the concentration gradient from high to low and doesn't need energy. Which of the statements best describes the movement? So A says sodium, potassium move by active transport. Okay, I can leave that one in because I definitely know sodium and potassium are moving by active transport because it needs energy. And then it says glucose moves by osmosis. Wait a second. Osmosis is only the movement of water. So it can't be A. B, sodium and potassium ions move by active transport. Yep, they need energy. Glucose moves by facilitated diffusion. Ooh, well, they stuck that facilitated in there, but diffusion still means moving with the concentration gradient high to low, no energy. Okay, so it could be B. I'm going to double check. C says sodium potassium ions move by facilitated diffusion and glucose moves by osmosis. Again, even if you're not sure about the facilitated diffusion, osmosis is the movement of water. Can't be C. And then D says sodium potassium ions move by facilitated diffusion and glucose moves by active. Again, glucose requires no energy and active is energy, so it can't be D. So the best answer is B. So 17 is B. Question number 18. Mr. Suter and I both particularly hate this question because honestly, the answer isn't the greatest. So sometimes you're going to run into questions where you have to think about what is the best answer and maybe not what you would put down if it was an open-ended question. So it says the rough endoplasmic reticulum and Golgi apparatus work together in eukaryotic cells. What is one way that the rough endoplasmic reticulum assists the Golgi apparatus? So if you're in my class, the other day I went over on the board and I drew out the very simple central dogma idea of that we have DNA in the nucleus that's transcribed and go to the ribosomes, which are on the rough endoplasmic reticulum, where the protein is produced, and then it's packaged in the Golgi apparatus to go to wherever it needs to in the cell. So breaking that down, DNA, genetic material in the nucleus, protein synthesis occurs at the ribosomes, Golgi apparatus is the packaging. So if I'm looking at this question, A, it assembles nucleic acids from monomers. Nope, that has nothing to do with Golgi apparatus or endoplasmic reticulum. Cross it out. B, it breaks down old damaged macromolecules. Nope, has nothing to do with the ER or Golgi apparatus. C, it packages new protein molecules into vesicles. Okay, well, I already said that was Golgi apparatus, so maybe. And then D, it says determines which protein molecules to synthesize. Ooh, synthesizing proteins. Okay, that's ribosomes. So now I have to go back and see what does the question specifically say. And it says, what is one way that the rough ER assists the Golgi apparatus? So it's talking about the rough ER, not the Golgi apparatus. So the packaging part is the Golgi apparatus. So this is one where they're trying to get you to put C. But the best answer is D, even though I don't love the word determines in there, because really all the ribosome on the endoplasmic reticulum does is just read the mRNA strand. Well, it still is synthesizing it, so that really is the best answer. So I would choose D for that one. But if you put C in there for your answer, no, Mr. Suter and I have highly debated that question. I'm going to skip down to number 20 real quick and then go back to the open-ended. So number 20 says, which example is an activity that a fish most likely uses to maintain homeostasis within the body? Okay, so what does a fish do? A fish lives in water. Okay, it has to have gills because it lives in the water. So I'm thinking about how a fish breathes. It needs food. Okay, so I got a fish pictured in my head. And it says using camouflage to avoid predators. Well, how does avoiding predators maintain homeostasis? That one really doesn't work. B, feeding at night to regulate the body temperature. Okay, so how would eating regulate your body temperature? Body temperature is regulated by sweating, so it can't be that one. C, moving to deeper water to regulate metabolistic waste. Well, again, that's something that the fish is doing. It's not that their body is doing. And then D, it says exchanging gases through its gills to regulate oxygen levels. That's something that the cells of the body are doing to regulate or maintain homeostasis. So D would be the best answer on that one.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes.
I could see where B, right, feeding at night to regulate body temperature. Like if you're thinking, oh, well, maybe a snake lays on a rock to regulate body temperature in the sunlight. Like I could see where maybe they would get confused on that. But a lot of this, we're talking about life, guys. And you have to use a little common sense, right? I mean, you had, like, just don't forget to look at these questions with an air of, like, I know what a gill in a fish is, and I know that has something to do with breathing, right? You know what I mean? So I just wanted to point that out. Don't forget to use some of your common sense.
And they do put answers in there that are meant, like,
Right.
to have you put the wrong answer.
Right. Do you know the difference between, like, are you thinking? You know what I mean? You have to really stop and think about it. So what's left? Just your open-ended?
Yes. And Mr. Suter, you, because we got like signed out so much, you never shared the form in the chat. So maybe you want to do that as I'm going over this last one.
Okay. Did you send that? And I did kind of share my screen with the questions because we could make them big enough they could read it on the screen.
Perfect. Thank you. I was having a little bit of trouble because I can't see when we're going back and forth on that. All right. So this last open-ended question, I'm not crazy about it. Personally, I read it a few times and I had to like kind of think about what this meant. It says some animals can produce a potassium ion concentration inside their cells that is 20 times greater than that of their environment. This ion concentration gradient is maintained by the plasma membrane. All right, so as soon as I see that, I see concentration gradient and I see plasma membrane. I'm going to start thinking about homeostasis. It says identify the process in the cell membrane that produces this difference in concentration.
You're right.
Yeah. No.
Take a drink. So identify the what's going on today. Identifying the process in the cell membrane that produces the difference in concentration. And so I don't want to. She has a plan for this, but she's back.
No, go ahead.
I mean, when I think about it, I'm just thinking about the fact that they're trying to point out that some animals produce potassium ion concentration inside their cells that's 20 times greater. So if you're going to make a concentration inside your cell that's greater than what's outside your cell, that requires energy. So if I was answering this question on the Keystone, I would think about, okay, well, I'm going to definitely need to get energy in there. I'm going to need to use energy. How do I move things across the cell membrane with energy? I do it through active transport. And what molecule happens with active transport, or do I use active transport across the membrane? I use a protein. So if I was writing the answer, I would be sure to say, hey, to get this higher concentration inside the cell, I need to have a protein pump of some part type. That protein pump is going to take ATP, and it's going to move molecules from one side of the cell to the inside of the cell to create a greater concentration. And I think if you did that, you'd be golden.
And
like, don't overthink.
Right. And that's, when I read this question, I was like, wait a second, what process? So I started thinking, are they asking for something really specific? So like, I'm like, all of a sudden, like, oh my gosh, are they talking about photosynthesis? Are they talking about, some other type of bioenergetic? But really, that process of transport, that is a process. So again, if I'm keeping something in there, I'm using energy, like Mr. Suter said. So part A, it's just identify. I know like they give you like 4 lines there, but like the process is active transport. B is explain the process. Active transport is able to pump ions, against the concentration gradient to keep more inside of the cell. It requires energy. It requires the use of a protein, any of those things. And if you're not sure and it's a concentration gradient question with a plasma membrane, when in doubt, put anything about transport. Even if you don't use the word active, you could even put in something that like they would use the process of transport. Transport requires the use of a protein, inside of a cell membrane, which is made up of phospholipids. Like all of that is at least going to receive some credit, even if you don't figure out the against the concentration gradient and the energy portion. And then the last part of that says compare this to another mechanism that moves material across the cell membrane. And there you could simply just talk about the difference between active transport and passive transport. And active transport requires energy. Passive transport does not. It allows materials to move straight through the phospholipid bilayer. And there you've used some vocabulary words to explain the process.
So, and one thing I'd warn you guys about, like, you might, as you're writing that answer, have things like sodium, potassium pop to mind, and that would be great. And you might think, oh, well, in active transport, the protein changes shape when energy is applied to it, and that's what allows it to move stuff across the cell membrane, but in facilitate or passive transport, it doesn't. And those are all great, but what I would warn you about is starting to explain things that you don't understand. You know, you're better to just give, like, you would be better off to say, hey, this is active transport. It takes energy, and, you know, it's a protein. It's in the cell membrane, than you would be to start. What I see happen sometimes is people try to put things in that maybe they don't fully understand, and they write them wrong. So now you're putting wrong information in that's going to detract more than having basic right information. If that makes sense.
But at the same time, you can't receive points if you write nothing.
Nothing, right.
You know, write something that, and that's why I was saying, like, even if you didn't get that it was active transport, even if you just said, oh, homeostasis has something to do with the membrane and its phospholipid, and the materials move on a concentration gradient using proteins, like, you're bound to at least get a point or two for having something that relates to those ideas. So don't leave it blank. That's the worst thing you can do, is leave an open-ended question blank.
Go back and find a multiple choice question about active transport.
Right.
I mean, even right here on this thing, we had I forget which one it was, but there was one about active transport. Right here, the sodium potassium pump. Right there's all the information you really needed, right? It talks about sodium.
You could actually probably use that for part C. You probably could write down a sodium potassium pump within a cell membrane requires energy to move sodium potassium ions into and out of a cell. The movement of glucose into or out of a cell does not require energy. Hey, guess what? I've just answered part C.
Right. Use your resources. All right. So I do have the attendance form here. I'm going to shoot that out in the chat right now. So the attendance form is there. You can go ahead and sign that up. You have a little bit of time to sign that up. Sign up for that yet. Attach your graphic organizers, any notes that you took during this. Make sure you keep that stuff all together. We'll look at that at the very end. Don't forget to go out and look at the quizzes thing. It's kind of long this week because there's two. Do one today, maybe do one on Monday or something like that, but participate in those. And anything else, Mrs. Smith? I think that's it. This was a long one today. I'm sorry, but we did cover two. We actually, like I said earlier, we have videos that go more depth that we will share with you closer to the test if you want to review, like, the week before the test and go deeper dives. So a lot of stuff, but you've learned a lot this year. You should be proud of yourselves. And I think with that,
and maybe we'll learn how to make technology work.
No, we know how to make technology work. It is not our fault that we're saddled with things that just don't.
And this is why you take the Keystone on paper and pencil and not on the computer. Have a wonderful day.
See you later. Where's the link for the quizzes again from Emma? It's on the Keystone Review Guide. I'm going to copy and paste a link to that guide in here too for anybody that wants to see that again. Bam, you'll find it near the bottom.
And it's down at the bottom.
Yeah, and I actually, look, I highlighted them for you this week because I love you guys. All right, have a wonderful week, and we're out. And